everyone. I'm Julie Savinsky. I'm the Director of Events at Warwick's, and on behalf of Warwick's and the University of San Diego College of Arts and Sciences and the Humanities Center, welcome to an evening with Admiral William H. McRaven in conversation with USD's very own Amanda Ritter. Housekeeping details to go through with you before we get started. If you could turn off your cell phone so that you're not that person that people will be looking at and getting angry with. So if you could do that for us. You turned in some question cards, so we may not get to everybody's question, but we will get to a good variety of those. So thank you for doing that. Most of you received a pre-signed copy of the book when you came in, but I want you all to think about some other occasions that might be coming up, like graduation or Father's Day. So we have a limited supply of some signed copies up there, so think about that. You might get some extra ones for some gifts. If you come to our events very often, you know that I always thank you, and we do mean this sincerely. If it wasn't for you coming out and supporting events like this with Admiral McRaven, we would not be able to continue to bring wonderful authors to the San Diego area. So I want you all to give yourselves a round of applause first. Yay! Make you all famous with those signed books that you have. So if you can raise those up and hold them up high and proud, I'm going to take a picture of y'all and you're going to be famous on Facebook later. Oh, fantastic. And I can't get all of you, so we do it kind of in sections. There we go. Fantastic, thank you. We all need to thank the University of San Diego College of Arts and Sciences and the Humanities Center, with a special thank you to Dr. Noel Norton, Dean of the College of Arts and Sciences, and Dr. Brian Clack, the Director of the Humanities Center. They always embrace these events with such enthusiasm and generosity, and it's because of them that we're able to be sitting in this beautiful theater. So if you see them on campus, thank you. If you see them around town, thank them for us. Thank you to the President of the University, Dr. James Harris, and the Vice President Provost, Gail Baker, Katie, Lindy, and Taylor, who are behind our scenes people, and the Warwick staff, who always is ready to serve you and take good care of you guys. So without further ado, here is Dr. Brian Clack to introduce the program. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Julie, and many thanks to your fantastic team at Warwick's. It's always such a pleasure to work with you. As Director of the Humanities Centre, I have to say that our partnership with Warwick's is really one of the most exciting and fruitful endeavours taking place at USD. It's brought to our campus a stunning range of authors, including Sean Penn, Ian McEwan, and Isabel Allende. And later this week, in fact, we'll be delighted to host both Scott Pelley and Elizabeth Gilbert. We should also thank Warwick's for their commitment to the military community by providing a good number of free tickets for this event. And on that matter, it's important for us to honour and recognise all of those present who have served, are currently serving, and their families. Please give them all a big round of applause. And now it truly is an honour to introduce tonight's very special guest. There is so much to be said about this man that it takes a Herculean effort just to keep things brief. Admiral William H. McRaven retired from the US Navy in 2014 after more than 37 years of service in which he commanded at every level. As a four-star admiral, his final assignment was as commander of all US Special Operations Forces, during which time he led a force of 69,000 men and women and was responsible for conducting counter-terrorism operations worldwide. He, in fact, constitutes a vital and celebrated part of American military history, having organized and orchestrated some of the most famous missions in recent memory, including the capture of Saddam Hussein, the rescue of Captain Richard Phillips, and the raid resulting in the death of Osama bin Laden. Admiral McRaven is a recognized national authority on U.S. foreign policy and has advised Presidents George W. Bush, Barack Obama, and other U.S. leaders on defense issues. He's spearheaded, moreover, the creation of the Preservation of the Force and Family Initiative to ensure the mental, spiritual, and physical well-being of those who serve, as well as their families. He's been the recipient of a breathtaking number of awards and honors, and it would take us all evening just to list these. Here's a few of them. USO's Man of the Year for 2013, the Republic of France's Legion of Honor Award, the National Defense University's American Patriot Award, and the FBI Agents Association Distinguished Service Award. And if this were not enough in itself, Admiral McRaven's achievements in the fields of education and authorship are considerable. From 2015 until 2018, he was Chancellor of the University of Texas System. His books are hugely respected likewise. Spec Ops, Case Studies in Special Operations Warfare was published in 1996, while his New York Times best-selling title, Make Your Bed, was met with glowing reviews. The Wall Street Journal declared that it was a book that should be read by every leader in America. And he's here with us this evening, of course, to discuss his new book, which you all have in your hands, Sea Stories, My Life in Special Operations. Now, this is a book that reviewers have called spellbinding, a book that, and I quote, reads like a thriller and covers some of the most important historical actions taken by Navy SEALs. Admiral McRaven will tonight be in conversation with Amanda Etta, Director of the Military and Veterans Program here at USD. Amanda enlisted in the United States Marine Corps in April of 2000 and was assigned as an aviation supply specialist. After transitioning off active duty, she completed a master's degree in adult education from Kansas State University. Amanda is spearheading USD's new military-connected hub, targeting opportunities and ameliorating challenges faced by service members, veterans, and their families. In no small part due to her leadership, USD is currently ranked as number 49 in the US News and World Report rankings of best colleges and universities for veterans. So, without further ado, please welcome to the stage Amanda Etta and our very special guest, Admiral William McRaven.
Thank you.
No, thank you. Great to be here.
I think you're pretty popular among San Diego. It's a full house tonight. So I want to start by thanking you for being here. It's pretty clear not only have you done amazing things in the military, but for those in the audience about to read the book, you're an amazing storyteller. I don't have to go through all of your amazing accomplishments, but in the past few years, between your retirement after 37 years from Special Forces in the Navy, 2014, your commencement speech, 2015, Chancellor of University of Texas System, 2017, Make Your Bed, 2019, a new book, Sea Stories, sharing your stories. What else can we accomplish? Is there anything else that you are anticipating in the next few years that you can let us know on?
Well, first, Amanda, let me thank you for moderating tonight and for Warwick's for hosting this along with USD. I've been very fortunate, obviously, coming from 37 years in the military and transitioning to another fabulous job as the Chancellor of the University of Texas System. It was interesting. People asked me very early on, how was the transition? You go from the military where you just tell people what to do and they do it, and then you go into higher education. I said, well, if you think being in the military, you just tell people what to do and they do it, you never spent a day in the military. I said, so the transition was actually pretty seamless because, managing and leading men and women, as we did in the military, applies to higher education and healthcare as well. So I enjoyed my time as the Chancellor chancellor. Now I'm continuing to work at the University of Texas. I teach a graduate class there, and I'm enjoying spending time with the young men and women. And we'll just have to see what the future holds.
Yeah, very exciting. We can't wait to see. So you come from a military family. Your grandfather was an Army surgeon. Your dad was a fighter pilot. You grew up, the first chapter talking about you as a kid in a French parlor bar with your dad. And then going into NROTC at the University of Texas. In your younger life, was there any point that you thought this is going to be my calling in life?
Yeah, again, growing up with the greatest generation, so as you point out, my father was a fighter pilot in World War II, a little bit of time in Korea. My mother was an East Texas school teacher, but that generation, you think about them, I mean, they grew up as children of World War I, of children of the Great Depression. The men all went off to war, to World War II. And what I enjoyed about spending time with them, my father and my mother's friends, was a certain sense of camaraderie. I mean, the military was about camaraderie, it was about serving the nation, and you saw that every single day, when you spent time with the men and women that served during that time frame. And so while I don't think I looked early on and said, well, my calling in life is to be in the military, it's just that was kind of the family business. And I enjoyed the family business. I enjoyed my time on military bases. I enjoyed my time with the Army, Navy, and the Air Force, and the Marine Corps. It was great, and it just seemed like a natural path for me.
From reading the book too, I see, and actually some of the awards that you've received, I know that sports has also played a significant role. Coach Turnbow, I think is his name. But if you could share a little bit more about that, because I think especially if we have some college students and up and coming ROTC maybe in the audience, can you say a little bit about how that has impacted you? And even just from the stories from the book, it's embedded in some of your decision making.
Yeah, when people have a chance to read sea stories, I've been asked, what's my favorite story? And it's kind of hard to pull one of them out. But the one that I would offer to you is, the title of the chapter is It's a Wonderful Life. And the story is about me as I was 16 years old, I guess, trying to break the school record in the mile. And the school record in the mile was I think 4:32, and I had just run my second to last race, and I had run a 4:37. So I was 5 seconds off the record, which is horrible when it comes to the mile. And I'd been working for years trying to break the record. Well, I had one more week left before the last and final meet my senior year, and the day before the meet, I get a call from a coach. He had been the assistant head football coach, or he'd been an assistant football coach. And frankly, I didn't even know he knew I existed. I mean, our paths had crossed a little bit, but he was a football coach, and I was a guy that ran around in circles. So there was just this sense of awe. But he calls my house. And my dad says, hey, you got a call from one of your coaches. So I pick up the phone. I thought it was going to be one of my track coaches, and it was Coach Turnbow. And of course, I'm stunned. I'm 16 years old. This guy is kind of a semi-deity when it comes to the high school. And he says, Bill, I understand you're trying to break the mile record. You got one more race. I said, yes, sir. He says, look, you can do this, Bill. You just run hard, and you can break that record. And that phone call gave me inspiration, enough inspiration that the next day I went out and, in fact, broke the mile record. But here's the point. Nobody cared about the mile. I was probably the only person that cared about the high school mile record. And, in fact, the next year, a faster runner than I broke the record. But the fact that I was able to set the goal and achieve my goal because of that phone call from Coach Turnbow, it really gave me the confidence that if I could set that goal and make it, I could be a Navy SEAL. So the thing about writing your life story, and I've told folks this before, I encourage everybody at some point in time to write your life story. And whether it ever gets published or not, it's important to do it because when you look at your life in its totality, you begin to see how you got to this point in your life. If you look at it just in segments, you don't see that. But what I saw from that phone call was that phone call from that coach that night that allowed me to break that record, that sent me off to SEAL training, that fundamentally changed my trajectory in life. One phone call. And so the reason I call it It's a Wonderful Life, if you remember the great Frank Capra movie, It's a Wonderful Life, a Christmas classic, where George Bailey and all the lives he affected. And the end of the story is the fact that Coach Turnbow was my George Bailey. He made one phone call, it changed my life. And while most of you out there won't have an opportunity to do a bin Laden raid or rescue a Captain Phillips or capture Saddam Hussein, you will have an opportunity. You will have an opportunity to affect and inspire other young men and women. Never miss that opportunity. And that is, and again, sports allowed me to engage with coaches, to engage with other teammates. And at the end of the day, being in the military is about teammates and the people that you work with.
Mm-hmm. And you even use the story of the Hoosier basketball team as you're getting ready to go in with SEAL Team 6. So amazing story there. And you have led a very adventurous life. I think there's 3 different stories of crashes: a helicopter crash, a boat crash, and a parachute crash. And throughout everything that you've done, people would think you're fearless. But has there ever been a time where you felt fear?
Yeah, you're afraid just about every day. And the idea is you have to be able to overcome that fear. So I know there are a number of SEALs in the audience here, and there are other folks, probably first responders and folks that do, courageous and important things for the country. And if you're a firefighter going into a building, you damn well better be afraid, And if you're in the military getting ready to jump out of a helicopter, you're probably going to be a little afraid. That fear is important. One, it keeps you focused on the mission, but also you realize that every time you overcome your fear, it makes you a little stronger. So yeah, I was afraid a lot. If you're not afraid, you're probably not as smart as you think you are. So it's okay to be afraid, but you've got to be able to overcome those fears and get the mission done.
Very true. And you have a lot of potential military leaders in the audience, I'm sure. In your book, you do talk about why people serve, and you've talked about why you serve. Can you share a little bit more about why you think, what is something that you would give about sense of service to up-and-coming military leaders?
Yeah, one of the best lessons, I think about all the lessons I learned, leadership lessons I learned in my time going through SEAL training as a SEAL, but actually one of the best leadership lessons I learned was when I was a midshipman at the ROTC program at the University of Texas. And in between your freshman and sophomore year, that summer, they send you on what they euphemistically call a cruise. And my cruise was good enough. It was to Pearl Harbor, and I was on a fast frigate called the USS Olette. But what the Navy does in its wisdom, and an incredibly wise decision on the part of the Navy, is as a budding officer, you go on the ship as an enlisted man. And you do everything that the sailors on the ship do. I mean, my first cruise was 9 weeks. So you're chipping paint, you're cleaning the heads, you're down in the boiler room, you're doing all the sorts of things that the sailors do. And the reason the Navy has you do that as a budding officer is so that you understand that the decisions you make as an officer affect those sailors in the boiler room, affect those sailors cleaning the heads. And understand that the more senior you get, I talk about professional distance. You can never get so senior that you forget about the troops. It is all about the troops. If you want to get the mission done, you have to take care of the troops. That doesn't mean you coddle them. That means what you do is you make sure they understand what the mission is, you set high standards, you give them the resources to do the job, and you hold them accountable. Every single soldier, sailor, airman, or Marine, or even civilian that goes into an organization, they don't go into an organization and say, gee, I want to be part of a mediocre organization. Where is that mediocre organization that I'm looking for? Everybody wants to be part of a great organization. Well, the way you become part of a great organization is you set high standards and you hold people accountable and you allow them to achieve those standards. But as an officer, make sure you understand that the decisions you make affect those troops in the field.
amazing stories of leadership, from the first book, Make Your Bed, to the continuation, in-depth experience in Sea Stories. And for those of anyone in the audience that doesn't know what a sea story is, I felt that was a significant title itself. But if you could share maybe a little bit more about that, and what prompted you to go in to share these stories?
Yeah. Well, the common for the sailors out there, everybody knows that the sea stories, generally are a little bit embellished in there. But, sailors have been telling sea stories ever since they were sailors. And so when I thought about writing a memoir, I didn't want to make it a classic memoir. And, as was pointed out, the book Sea Stories, it has the story of bin Laden and the rescue of Captain Phillips and the capture of Saddam Hussein. But what I hope people take away from the book are the great men and women I had the opportunity to work with, because that's really what I wanted to capture in the book, kind of through my eyes. So each of these stories, the 18 stories in there, they're short stories. There's a beginning, a middle, and end. There's a point to the story. But the reason I called it the Sea Story is because it's what I saw, what I experienced, what I believed. So it is from my point of view. And so that makes it somewhat different. But the reason that I wrote the book actually had a lot to do with first my father and then my kids. So again, as I mentioned, my dad was a World War II vet, but he was also a professional football player. He played football for the Cleveland Rams back in the late 30s, early 40s. He had this fascinating life on his own. And I only heard bits and pieces of it growing up. And a lot of it was listening to him tell stories with his friends. And it wasn't until he was about 75 years old, my mother had passed away, and he said, Dad, I kind of want to know more about your life. I want to hear the stories. So we actually put him on videotape, and Dad immodestly called it the greatest story ever told. But when he told the stories, there were stories I'd never heard of. I mean, things I never knew about my dad that were just terrific stories, but I had to wait till he was 75 to hear the stories. My kids at one point in time, and again, I've got a lot of friends here in the audience, growing up here in San Diego, and all of my operational tours until I became a flag officer were here in San Diego. I mean, I started off at Underwater Demolition Team 11 over in Coronado, and then spent time here as a SEAL. But my kids, back in the day, before 9/11, I was just dad. I mean, being a SEAL, I don't think they really understood what I did every day, and they didn't really have an appreciation for it. They just knew they were part of the SEAL community. So as they got to be older, boys and young ladies, they said, you really have never told us about all the things that you've done. So part of this, actually, this started well before Make Your Bed with me just writing down the stories that I thought at one point in time I would pass on to them. And now there's a couple lines in here that I think, I remember the line on where I confess to having something to do with having to take your shoes off when you go through the TSA line. I know the president made that decision, and you'll have to read the book, but at one point in time my son said, Dad, why in the world did you put that in there? So that was a story he had no idea about, and again, I think we'll find some interesting ones.
I think that's the one area where you say, I regret saying that.
Yeah, that's right.
And I do want to also attest for the way that you talk about, because you mentioned you hope it's about the people that you served with, and that's one thing that I really admired, is the way that you are able to describe the service members, and it puts a personable character traits to some of our country's greatest leaders. So thank you for sharing that. And sharing these stories, oftentimes, especially in the SEAL community, it's sometimes frowned upon. How did you feel writing that? And is there anything that, did you feel that was going to impact this?
Yeah. So when I was the commander of all U.S. Special Operations, a number of SEALs started writing books, and this became kind of the other folks were upset about SEALs writing books. So I went down. Our headquarters is in Tampa, Florida. So I was getting ready to have my commanders conference with all of my colonel level, my 06 level colonels and captains, and their senior enlisted, and I had a lot of them. They would have just about filled up this room. And I knew somebody was going to ask me the question about SEALs writing books. In fact, I was so prepared, I decided to go ahead and plant the question in the audience so that I could answer it. But I went down to my librarian. So we have a librarian in the headquarters building. And so I go down to see the librarian, and I said, look, I got this conference coming up. I said, I'd like to know, how many other people have been writing books, on special operations, because, and she looks at me kind of funny, and I said, look, can you just kind of write down a couple of the books, because I want, and she says, well, those books. What do you mean? She goes, the library. I said, no, I mean, kind of since 9/11. Yeah.
Wow.
And so you realize that everybody was writing books. And I was okay with that, because all of us that are in the military, at some point in time, read a book, saw a movie that inspired us to go into the military. So I've told folks, look, I am okay with writing books if it is about the courage and the sacrifice and the things that are important for men and women that are reading these books to understand about the military. And you have to go through, if you're in the military, you have to go through a very lengthy process to get the book approved. So when I was writing this, knowing that I was going to have to go through that process, I wrote the book so that I didn't tell any secrets. Having said that, it took 5 months, almost 5 months, to get through the Department of Defense review process. The good news was they came back, and after 5 months, and so that's every intelligence agency, the National Security Council, every combatant commander that touched one of these missions, and after 5.5 months, it took me an hour and a half to make the changes, because they were pretty much happy to glad changes. Because again, I had written the book not to divulge anything that was critical.
Outstanding. So were there pieces that were edited out during, or that?
I mean, there was
Yes.
nothing significant that was
Okay.
no, again, there were literally some happy to glad changes. There was, at one point in time, they said, you can't say SEALs and helicopters in the same sentence. I said, I'm sorry, what? So, you can't say, in this particular context, I couldn't say SEALs and helicopters in the same sentence. I said, okay. I just rolled with it. I wasn't going to go back. At that point in time, after 5 months, I wasn't going to fight them on it.
Now they're filtering you. So one thing that you also speak so well on, and I think that your previous book, Make Your Bed, you talk about it being little life lessons from SEAL training. And the one thing that I know is a continuous theme in this book is leadership. And the way I see all of those themes from Make Your Bed, some of them are very similar. The one, like we already kind of mentioned, can't go at it alone. Right. So you mentioned Coach Turnbow already, but if you could share some other significant individuals that have made this happen for you.
Yeah, so one of the, again, what I try to have, again, some, important point at the end of it. And the one I talk about that, again, some of the folks here in the audience will remember is back in 2001, I went out for a routine parachute jump out at Brown Field, which is South San Diego here. And I mean, it was one of those kind of gorgeous San Diego days. We took off from North Island, C-130. The idea was we were going to get up to 13,000 feet, and the ramp comes down, you jump out, you fall to about 5,500 feet, you wave off, you pull your ripcord, chute opens, and you glide easily down to the landing zone. Well, this particular day, again, C-130 goes up, ramp comes down, again, not a cloud in the sky. I mean, it's a Chamber of Commerce day. You can see the Pacific Ocean, I can see Mexico. Get the green light, I jump out, I'm falling, everything's looking good, and I see kind of two guys off to the side over here and one guy off to the side over here, and this guy is kind of drifting towards me. I'm kind of watching him, and as I'm falling, I'm kind of checking my altimeter, watching him, and then he looks okay, and then all of a sudden I realize there's a guy underneath me, and I had probably slid over him, but I look at my altimeter and it's too late. He opens his chute. So in relative terms, I'm moving at 120 miles an hour down. He has essentially stopped. So I come down, I hit his chute, and it's kind of like getting hit by an airbag, and it kind of stuns me, and I roll off the chute, and now I'm kind of tumbling out of control. What I should have done, the jumpers know, is I should have gotten stable again, but I was a little bit dazed, and instead as I was tumbling, I figured, not sure where I am, I better pull my ripcord. I pulled the ripcord, and the pilot chute came out and wrapped around one leg because I was in a downward attitude, and another part of the parachute wrapped around the other leg. The riser wrapped around the other leg. So now I'm kind of tangled up in the parachute, falling head down, thinking to myself, yeah, this doesn't look so good. So I'm kind of screwing with it, trying to figure things out. And the good news is the parachute opened. But when a parachute opens, it blossoms. The bad news is when it opened, it broke me in two and busted my pelvis by about 4 or 5 inches, pulled the muscles out of my stomach and my legs and my back, and then I ended up about 2 miles from the drop zone. But the point of the...
That was intentional.
yeah, I wish I could have made it to the drop zone. But the point of the story wasn't the parachute accident, because as I'm quick to tell folks, relative to what I saw after 9/11, these young men and women that were hit in Iraq and Afghanistan, that parachute accident was a scratch. But what is important to know was the fact that now all of a sudden, I am laid up in the hospital. I failed to mention, I was a Navy captain at the time. I was the Commodore, as we refer to it, in charge of the West Coast SEALs. And now I'm in a hospital bed, I'm in a wheelchair, and a lot of people had to take care of me. My wife became my nurse, giving me the shots every day. My colleagues came by and took care of me. And my boss, Admiral Eric Olson, ensured I stayed in the Navy. And so the point of that story was, I don't care how big and how strong and how fast and how tough you are. At the end of the day, you need a lot of people to help you get through life. And I was fortunate to have a lot of people help me get through that time in my life, and frankly, a lot of other times. But what I'd tell you is, as I look out in the audience, all of you that have lived more than a few years, you know the deal. Find friends, find colleagues, find people of good cheer and spend time with them, because at some point in time, you are going to need those people to help you get through life, and maybe you can be one of those people helping somebody else get through life. But that was the story of the parachute accident.
Yeah. So I'm actually very glad that you told that story. It's one of my favorite stories. It's very visceral in the book. And then it goes on to talk about one of my other favorite lines from Make Your Bed, which is Life's Not Fair, Drive On, the sugar cookie. And from that story, the parachute, I remember the EMT asking if you wanted morphine. I think that was the story after, and you denied it 3 times. So what can you say? Because a lot of times you talk about kind of leaning into the discomfort of things. You found yourself enjoying random places to sleep and things like that. So what can you tell us and share with us about how to best lead into that discomfort?
Yeah, I mean, part of going through SEAL training is you are cold, wet, and miserable every day. And, people often ask me, what is it about SEAL training? What is the secret to SEAL training? I had some young, he was a nationally ranked decathlete, and I'll leave the name out because he is now in the teams, nationally ranked decathlete at the University of Texas, and he wanted to come by and have lunch with me because he was getting ready to go to SEAL training. So I came over and we had lunch, and he says, well, sir, just kind of want to get some idea on what I need to do. He says, do I need to do some more pull-ups? I mean, he's 6'4", he's broad. He said, no. He says, more push-ups? No. Do I need to swim more? No. Do I need to run more? No. And he started to get a little frustrated because I kept saying no. I said, there's only one thing you have to do. You don't quit. He goes, no, I got that. I said, I'm not sure you do. I said, there's only one thing you have to do, and that's not to quit. And the reason that is important is not because when you go through SEAL training, yeah, it helps to be physically fit and to be at the top of your game. But at the end of the day, your career as a Navy SEAL is going to have a whole lot to do with whether or not you quit when the going gets tough. Whether you quit when you're at 9,000 feet in the Hindu Kush, whether you quit when you're in Tikrit when it's 120 degrees, whether you quit when you're in Somalia, whether you quit when you're on the ship, or whether you quit when your family has to move 20 times. because that's what life, and not only in the SEAL teams, but in the military, is all about. It's about your resilience. It's about your willing to press through. And I don't care whether you're a SEAL or a soldier, sailor, airman, a Marine, or a civilian in a tough assignment. You can't quit when it gets tough. And so SEAL training plays that out in spades very, very quickly. And I will tell you, when I look back through my career, I would measure tough times by whether or not it met the threshold of BUD/S training, of SEAL training. And if I wasn't as cold and wet and miserable as I was in Hell Week, then I went, okay, I can keep moving. Yeah.
And you are so, your sense of conviction and being able to dare greatly, as you say, and with all the stories that you've told and everything that you've done and accomplished, right? So what is the best way to get to that level of, I'm so confident? What really prompted me was the piece where you were going to rescue Captain Phillips and you had to develop the action plan to get on the lifeboat. And you were so strong and confident in your abilities and skills. How does someone get to that level where they're so confident in their own skills and abilities?
Yeah, I think the answer to being confident is you do it a lot. You know, at one point in time, kind of late in my career, and I think I talk about it in the book, we had a mission we were getting ready to go on. And I'm in the Situation Room with the President and the Secretary of State and a number of others. And I remember Secretary Clinton at one point in time asked me about helicopter raids and said, because we were getting ready to do a helicopter raid to go get a guy named Salih Nabhan in Somalia. And she says, well, how many of these have y'all done? I'm thinking, I said, well, ma'am, we've done thousands of them. And I thought, oh my God, did I get that wrong? I mean, have we really? And I thought, oh no, it's thousands of them, because every night, guys from Iraq and Afghanistan, we were running about 25 missions a night in Iraq at the peak and about 12 missions a night in Afghanistan, and most of those had helicopter components to it. And so to be good at anything, to be confident at anything, and whether it's professional sports or whether it's being a faculty member or whether it's being a naval officer or an enlisted man or woman, the more you do it, the better you will get at it. So the idea of daring greatly, I think daring greatly, it looks like daring greatly when you're outside looking in. But when you're inside and you've done it thousands of times, it's a day's work and you know how to do it. It doesn't mean that it's not risky. It doesn't mean that it's not daring greatly. It's just that you have built up the experience and the expertise to do it so that it looks natural. When from the outside people go ooh and ah, and on the inside and this is what we do.
And another talent that you kind of talk about is that you're suited to exacting justice than to offer mercy. How does this mindset play into kind of your decision making? And can you kind of expand on how somebody finds that and is aware that those are kind of their talents?
Yeah, so that comment came, I think, at the end of the chapter on my time in the White House. And when I was in the White House, so right after 9/11, I mentioned the parachute accident. So I was supposed to go to the Pentagon. The parachute accident, again, Admiral Eric Olson took great care of me. I had a chance to spend about 30 days here after my change command. And then 9/11 happens in September, and I get diverted to the White House. And I arrive in the White House in October of 2001. And over the course of my 2 years there, a lot going on, obviously, but one in particular was we were trying to rescue these two missionaries, Martin and Gracia Burnham. They had been taken by a group called Abu Sayyaf, a terrorist group, Al-Qaeda affiliated in the Philippines, and I was trying to orchestrate their rescue, partially from the White House. And again, the folks in Manila, the embassy, were doing a lot of work. A whole lot of people were involved in it, but I was kind of the White House point of contact. Kind of make a long story short, at the end of the day, it didn't go like we'd hoped. Martin was killed when the Filipinos tried to rescue them. Gracia did survive, but it had been such a challenge to mobilize resources to go after these two missionaries because we had a lot of other things going on. I mean, 9/11 happened. Guys were fighting in Afghanistan. and there was just a lot happening. And I told myself at that point in time, when we were unsuccessful in rescuing Martin, again, Gracia and Martin, that if I ever had the chance, that I was going to put whatever resources I needed to do to rescue Americans in trouble. And fortunately, when I left the White House, I went to a unit that their responsibility was to rescue Americans in trouble. And I was committed to doing that. But there was a part, and I don't have the exact quote, but there was a part in Gracia Burnham's book. She wrote a book called In the Presence of Mine Enemies. And again, she is a remarkable, remarkable woman. But she talked about the fact that, that Martin in particular had love in his heart. And as missionaries, they had this great love, and she could forgive, the things that had happened to her. But I pointed out in the book, I'm not that good. I was, there were people that I thought just needed to pay the price for doing bad things. And as I said, everybody is given certain talents in life. My talents were better suited to exacting justice than to doing what the missionaries had done. And God bless the missionaries for the work they do, but I had different talents.
Thank you for those talents. Chapter 17 of your book is Operation Neptune Spear. It's 58 pages, detailed. I call it the Cliff Notes of the mastermind behind Takedown of Osama bin Laden. Can you share a little bit of some of the highlights? I think that's one of the areas I know that everybody wants to hear more about. So if you could share some of the highlights that really stick out to you.
So for me, it started in December of 2010. I was in Afghanistan, and the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, Admiral Mike Mullen, would make routine visits out to Iraq and Afghanistan. Every time he'd come by Afghanistan, he would come by my headquarters and visit, and we'd have a chat. So in December, he comes by and he says, I need to talk to you. So we go up to my office and he says, look, CIA thinks they have a lead on bin Laden. And they may give you a call and ask you to come, take a look at their planning and take a look at the intelligence. And candidly, I was a little dismissive. We'd had a lot of leads on bin Laden. I mean, bin Laden was, in Tora Bora, and bin Laden was in the Hindu Kush, and bin Laden was, in Pakistan and in Iran. And I mean, it was like trying to find Waldo. I mean, every time you turned around, there was a bin Laden sighting. And we had been, and the group that I led, I mean, the CIA really had the intelligence focus for the most part, but we were the guys who were supposed to get bin Laden. And again, a lot of guys we chased a lot of leads. So I said, yes, sir, happy to help. I'm busy here in Afghanistan. If they call, I'll go back. Well, about 3 weeks or a month later, I get a call to come back to D.C. And I go back and I go to CIA headquarters and I meet with the deputy director, Michael Morrell, and calls me into his office and shows me the compound. And if you've seen a picture of the compound in Abbottabad, it's a kind of a trapezoid-shaped compound. It's got 12-foot high walls, about 4 feet thick. There's an area that's got about an 18-foot high wall. There's a 3-story building in the center and then a couple of smaller outer buildings. And Mike says, hey, Bill, if your guys had to do this, how would you do it? So it's compound. It's what we do every night. Mm-hmm. I said, it's, I will tell you how we normally do it. In Afghanistan, from a forward operating base, you get about 60 or 70 Rangers and SEALs or Army Special Operations guys, and they hop on a bunch of helicopters out in the middle of nowhere. They fly for an hour or so. They land about 15 kilometers from the target, so the bad guys don't hear them. They'll foot patrol, march into the compound. They'll surround the compound. The snipers will get up on the walls. They'll have blocking points out, and then literally we get up on the walls and somebody will pull out a bullhorn and say, come out with your hands up. That rarely works, but we'll do that to give the bad guy a chance to give up if we think that's important. And then rarely when that doesn't happen, things get a little sporty. Guys get the bad guy, we get back on the helicopter and go back. We were doing those again in Afghanistan 10, 12 times a night. So I said, yeah, it's compound, we can do this. He said, okay, But he didn't give me a whole lot else at that point in time. So I head back to Afghanistan. About 3 weeks later, I get called back. And this time they lay out all the intelligence that I've got. And in this kind of trapezoid-shaped compound, there was a courtyard. And every day about noon, a guy would come out of the 3-story house and walk around the compound. And they called him the pacer. And because he would pace. And there were always a couple of kids with him. And he would just go like this for about an hour, clearly kind of getting exercise or something. And the CIA, and this will go down as one of the greatest missions in the history of the CIA, and the work they did was absolutely phenomenal. But at the time, we had, without going into a lot of detail, we had overhead reconnaissance, and we had human intelligence and imagery analysts and that sort of thing. But we just couldn't determine that the guy walking around in the compound was bin Laden. So I'm in probably 6 or 7 meetings with the president starting in either late January or early February, I don't remember. And, every single meeting, we would look at various options. We had a massive bombing option, but the president clearly didn't want to do that because of the president was very concerned about, killing women and children as he should have been. And that option kind of went off the table. We had a more surgical bombing option, but frankly, even with that, we might lose a couple of kids. And then, of course, we had the special operations raid. Well, as we go through the 5 or 6 meetings, or 6 or 7 meetings, again, we still don't know whether it's bin Laden. And finally, the last meeting I'm in, which is in very late April, I told the president that if we were going to do the mission, we had to do it in early May, because Abbottabad is a little bit of altitude, and it was heating up, and helicopters don't perform well at altitude when it's hot. And I knew that if we didn't do it in early May, it was probably going to be 4 months before the weather would cool down again, enough for us to be able to go the 162 miles from Afghanistan into Pakistan. So we kind of had to do it in that early May time frame. But I remember the president, in the last meeting I'm in, he had asked the director of the National Counterterrorism Center, a guy named Mike Leiter, he had asked Mike to review the CIA's intel, to kind of red team the CIA's intel. So we're in that last meeting and, kind of still debating the merits of the raid and the intelligence. And finally the president turns to Mike and he says, well, Mike, what do you think? He says, well, Mr. President, we've reviewed the CIA's intelligence, and we think the chance that it's bin Laden is anywhere between 60% and 40%. And when he said 40%, I'm like, well, this mission's over. I mean, who in the world is going to risk everything to fly a bunch of SEALs 162 miles into what was really kind of a suburban area in Pakistan? And this compound was a couple of miles from their West Point. It was a couple of miles from an infantry battalion. It was about a mile from a major police station. Oh, by the way, the Pakistanis would be happy to shoot us down coming across, and the Paks have nuclear weapons. I mean, there was nothing about this scenario that wasn't high risk, political high risk. So, I kind of think the mission might not go, but I told the president, look, I've got to head to Afghanistan. I'm going to command the mission from Afghanistan, and if you decide to go, we'll be ready. If you don't, I got bad guys in Afghanistan, and we'll just get back to work. So it takes me a day or so to get to Afghanistan, and on Friday night, so I think my meeting with the president was on Wednesday. On Friday night, the director of CIA, Leon Panetta, calls and says, the president's made the decision to go. And I've told folks, I said, look, irrespective of your politics, you would have been incredibly proud of how the President of the United States and the National Security Team handled this mission. In the meetings I was in, there was never any rancor. There were heated discussions, but there wasn't any rancor. There was nothing personal. The President and his team wanted to do what was right for the United States of America. Never once did we talk about politics. Now, I'm sure politics were being talked about in other rooms, because the president clearly had to understand and remember that Jimmy Carter became a one-term president because of the failed Desert One mission. But that never came up in any of the discussions. And it was, again, the president asked all the right questions. The other members of the team asked the right questions. They wanted to drill down. They wanted to know what the risks were. So again, irrespective of the politics. So on Friday, when Panetta says that the president said it's a go, it's like, okay, got it. Well, the next day the president calls me and says, well, Bill, what do you think? I said, well, Mr. President, if he's there, we'll get him, and if not, we'll go home. The problem with the go home scenario, though, And I had told the president this. I said, look, when the SEALs get on target, if somebody comes out with a gun, it isn't going to go too well for that guy. And in Pakistan, Afghanistan, a lot of people carry guns. So if the SEALs land on target and somebody comes out, that person will go away. And if they start to make their way from the first floor to the second floor to the third floor, and they're engaging targets along the way, and they get to the third floor, and the guy we thought was bin Laden turns out to be just some tall Pakistani, it would be a political disaster of epic proportions. That was the "but we'll come home." And of course, it was really only a 50-50, we believed it was only a 50-50 chance that it was bin Laden. And yet the president had made the decision to go. So I rolled the mission a day. We had some fog in the low-lying area, so I waited till Sunday, and that was, I think, May 1st here. So we launch, and again, 162 miles. The helicopters come in. You've probably seen the iconic photo of that Pete Souza, the president's photographer, took, where the president and his national security team are in. Everybody thinks it's a situation room. It is not. It is actually a little room across the way, and I kind of like to tell the story because when Admiral Mullen, the chairman, had told me, he said, look, Bill, you give me updates, and what I'll do is the president and his national security team, they will be in the situation room, and I'll come in and I'll update them, because I don't want them looking over your shoulder at everything that's happening. That's okay, sir, that's fine. I had sent an officer, in fact, the Air Force officer that is in that picture, a guy named Brad Webb, and I sent him there to be my liaison. So it starts off, and the president, we launched the mission, and Admiral Mullen went in, talks to Brad Webb, and then he comes back and says, Mr. President, the mission has been launched. Okay. Mr. President, they're halfway there. Okay. Mr. President, they're three-quarters way there. Okay. And he finally the president turns to Admiral Mullen and says, Mike, where are you getting this information? And Admiral Mullen says, it's somebody kind of nearby. And he says, you mean there's somebody here on the compound are they talking to McRaven? Yes, sir. Are they seeing what McRaven's seeing? Yes, sir. Where is this guy? Right next door. So we are a couple minutes out, and I'm sitting in a little command center. My executive officer is next to me, and he says, sir, General Webb says the vice president just walked into the room. I said, Brad, I'm a little busy, buddy. You need to handle this. He says, sir, the president just walked into the room. Sir, they're all in the room. So that was, of course, again, they all kind of converge in the room right about the time the helicopter comes in and goes down. And the reason the helicopter went down was the down blast from the helicopter hit the 18-foot high wall, and the down blast created this vortex. 18-foot high wall here, the three-story building, the other thing, it created a little vortex over the top of the helicopter. Helicopter lost lift, and it careened into the pen, what we call the animal pen next door. I wasn't overly concerned. I'm listening to the guys, the chatter. I mean, it was a hard landing, but we just started moving on to kind of plan B. And about 15 minutes or so later, I get the call from the ground force commander, for God and country, Geronimo, 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 which was the call sign or the code word for bin Laden. So I report to the CIA Director Panetta that we had Geronimo. And then I started thinking, I didn't ask whether bin Laden was dead or alive. So I went back to the ground force commander and I said, Geronimo EKIA, enemy killed in action, and then I get the Geronimo EKIA. So I pass that on. Well, I had only planned to be on target for 30 minutes, have the guys on target for 30 minutes, but they found a whole bunch of stuff on the second floor, so there were computer hard drives and paper. So I get the call through the SEAL commander, Captain Pete Van Hoosier, who was running the tactical piece from my Joint Operations Center. And Pete says, hey, sir, they want to collect all this stuff. And I'm like, okay, Pete, but we kind of need to pick up the pace here. So at about 45 minutes into the mission, I said, yeah, it's time to go. Tell them to wrap it up. And by 48 minutes, I think we were off the compound. Had to refuel on the way back, and then they started to come back. And the story I tell in the book that is a little bit of a lighthearted moment. So the helicopters are kind of crossing over the border in Afghanistan, coming back to the airfield that we've launched from. And now the president's on the video teleconference, and he says, well, Bill, do you know whether or not it's bin Laden? I said, sir, I need to go personally identify the remains, and then I'll let you know. So I head out just about 2 minutes by vehicle to the little airfield. So I get to the airfield, the SEALs are coming back in, helicopters landed, they've taken the remains, which are in a rubberized body bag, they bring it into the hangar, put the remains down, and I get down, I unzip the body bag, and again, without getting too graphic, he doesn't look too good, he's taking a couple of rounds, and the beard is shorter, so you know, if you've seen the classic photos of bin Laden, the beard is a little longer, but I was pretty certain it was bin Laden. And, but I knew he was about 6'4", so I pulled the remains out of the body bag and I lay out the remains. And there's a young SEAL nearby. And I said, hey son, how tall are you? And he says, sir, I'm 6'2". I said, good, come here. Lie down. He says, what? I said, I need you to lie down. And he very quickly picked up on what I was doing. He goes, okay. So lies down next to him, and the remains are a couple inches longer. I didn't think anything of it, so I go back, and so now I'm on the video with the president. The president says, well, what do you think? I said, well, sir, I need to get some DNA, but, you know, I'm pretty certain it's him. I said, no, by the way, I had a young SEAL lie down next to him, and the remains were a couple inches longer. And there's this pause on the other end of the video. And again, it had been a serious night with serious implications, but it was just the perfect moment. The president says to me, he says, okay, Bill, let me get this straight. We had $60 million for a helicopter, and you didn't have $10 for a tape measure? So 2 days later, I get back to Washington, D.C., and I'm briefing Capitol Hill, and my aide gets called. The president wants to see me over at the Oval Office. So me and a couple of my guys, we go to the Oval Office, and the president says, you know, thank you, appreciate it. And he goes, I got a little something for you. So he reaches behind the presidential desk and pulls out a plaque, and on the plaque it says, from the President of the United States to Vice Admiral Bill McRaven, if we have $60 million for a helicopter, I think we can find $10 for a tape measure. Next time, take the tape measure. And he's got a tape measure on the plaque. So I proudly display that.
Amazing stories. So you said in an interview that you thought that taking bin Laden might have been your purpose on this earth. And then you went on to say that it wasn't. Can you tell us a little bit more about finding that purpose?
Yeah, and again, I think a lot of this has to do with how you look at your life. As the bin Laden mission was unfolding, and you know, you realize that, one, people always ask me, how was it? And I said, well, we didn't know it was bin Laden when it started, and you don't know that until the mission's over. So I treated it like any other mission. Now again, obviously I knew there were political ramifications and everything, but I remember thinking to myself at one point in time, so here I was, a 3-star admiral. At that point in time, I had 34 years in special operations. I've been in Iraq and Afghanistan for on and off for, you know, most of the time since 2003. I was at the top of my game. I mean, I was very well suited to run this mission. I knew the men, I knew the mission. I'd written a book on Spec Ops. I'm thinking, well, this is it. You know, if you feel like there is any destiny in your life, I'm thinking, my gosh, this is where I'm a man of faith. This is where God has led me. He has led me to this point to be able to bring justice to all those people that were killed on 9/11. And so the mission happens, and I'm thinking, you know, this was my goal in life. But I realized later on that, no, that wasn't it. Because an interesting thing happened after that. I went on to give this commencement speech at the University of Texas in 2014. The commencement speech, which was the Make Your Bed speech, ended up affecting probably more people with some simple little advice than anything I had done in many, many years. And the only reason I gave that speech was because my name came out on the bin Laden mission. And the president of the University of Texas invited me to give the commencement address. And the commencement address, of course, has been seen tens of millions of times. I get stopped off. People in Texas, actually, most of them don't know I was even in the military. Even though they've all seen the video, I kind of want to say, I was in uniform in that video, But they know that I told them to make their bed, and for a lot of people that are, but for a lot of people that that are grappling with the challenges of life, the simple, principles that most of us grew up with, that has helped them. And so I realize that these things, again, because when you write the book, when you write your life story, you see how these things intersect and get you to where you are. And so I've told folks, look, if my legacy in this world is telling people to make their bed, I'm okay with that. I'm okay with that.
And then I just want to, I was going to hopefully have you read an excerpt, but luckily, most of the people in the audience are going to get a copy. But page 268, you talk about the next generation. You've worked with college students, you've worked with NROTC students. I'll give it to you just in case you need it. But the way you talk so highly of the next generation of this generation, if you could just, one of your final concepts was to give people hope. Yeah. And if you could just share a little bit about how you feel about this generation.
Yeah, this is the last couple of paragraphs from the chapter that I refer to as the next greatest generation. And the reason I call it the next greatest generation is I'm probably the biggest fan of the millennials you'll ever meet. This narrative that this generation is somehow soft and pampered and entitled, that I'm quick to point out that you never saw them in a firefight in Afghanistan, or you never saw them, as I did as the chancellor, going to school somewhere in the University of Texas system, trying to make a better life for themselves and for their families and for the next generation. This is a great, great generation. But at the end, I talk about one guy, and then I think it's important for y'all. Probably one of the chapters that means the most to me. But in the end, I said, if a nation is to survive and thrive, it must pass on the ideals that made it great and imbue in its citizens an indomitable spirit, a will to continue on regardless of how difficult the path, how long the journey, or how uncertain the outcome. People must have a true belief that tomorrow will be a better day, if only they fight for it and never give up. I saw this indomitable spirit in my parents and those who lived through the Great Depression and World War II. And I saw it again in the soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines whom I served with in Iraq and Afghanistan. And later, when I was the chancellor of the University of Texas system, I saw it in equal amounts in the young students who sat in the schoolhouses across Texas. From the battlefields to the classrooms, I have seen the young men and women of this generation, the off-the-line millennials. They are supposed to be pampered, entitled, and soft. I found them anything but. They are as courageous, heroic, and patriotic as their parents and grandparents before them. Those who fought and died or were wounded in Iraq and Afghanistan are the same young Americans who are building our bridges, finding the cures, and teaching our youth. They are the men and women who are volunteering to wear the uniform, fight the fires, and protect the people. They are not like my generation. They are in ways better. They are more inclusive. They don't see color or ethnicity or orientation. They value people for their friendship and their talents. They are more engaged. They will not stand by and watch bad things happen to good people. They are more questioning. They want to know why. Why are we going to war? Why are we increasing our debt? Why can't we do something new and different? They are risk takers, entrepreneurs, givers of their time and energy. Above all, they are optimists. And as challenging as the times may seem right now, this generation believes that tomorrow will be a better day. I am convinced that history will someday record that these young Americans were the greatest generation of this century. And I know, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that we will all be just fine.
So we have have a lot of questions. I'm going to give these to you because it may be the next book, inspiration. But I have 5 here that we can answer in yes or no. So we'll just keep it to yes or no because I know we're getting real close on time. But from the audience, is it true you went through an easy class in buds?
All right, come on. It was the last hard class, you know.
We can give the Bush thumbs up, thumbs down. And then this one's real brief. Which is a harder job, running all special forces worldwide or dealing with students, alumni, professors, and union workers at the Board of Regents?
Yeah, you know, again, I love my time as chancellor of the University of Texas system. It was much of the same mission. It was the opportunity to spend time around great young men and women and to hopefully put them on a path to improve their lives. If you have to transition from the military, that was a great way to do it.
This one asks about balancing. You have been married 41 years, and you speak so highly of your wife and beautiful children that you have, and a son that's serving currently. How do you balance family life?
Yeah, you're probably not going to like this answer, but the answer is you don't. You know, this idea out there that somehow, and this is my opinion, and my wife hates it when I answer this question this way. But the fact of the matter is, if you want to be good at anything, if you want to be really good, sometimes you have to sacrifice something. You know, to be good, you have to work hard. And that means that, you know, if you're going to work hard, something is going to fall by the wayside. The best thing that happened to me, and, you know, people always ask about that, is that I married the right woman. And the fact of the matter is, she has carried the load for the 41 years. She has raised our 3 great children, but she has had to sacrifice because I tried to be the best I could in the military. But I think it's true of any profession, whether you're a doctor, a lawyer, you know, a firefighter, a teacher, whatever you are, whatever you throw your life into, something else will have to be sacrificed if you're going to be very, very good at that. That's not to say you can't have a balanced life. I think you can. And I hope there are people out there that can balance both of them and be great at both of them. I was not one of those. I think I did, again, a good job, but I could not have done what I did without the support of my wife.
And these 2 we can do quick yes or no's. Do you know if, in fact, John Brennan did have his clearance revoked?
So I was actually, I was with John last night. He has not had his clearance revoked, nor have I. So.
Fantastic. And one final quick question. It says, we need more men like you in politics. Will you run for office?
No. I've been married 41 years. I would like to make it to 42. So no, you know, I've told folks, I said, look, I like policy. If ever an opportunity, you know, to serve in a policy arena comes up again under the right administration, I'd be honored to consider that. But politics is not something I'm interested in.
Good to know. Thank you for spending the evening with us. Thank you for your unwavering I didn't even get to finish right there. Go ahead. Excellent. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you all very much. Thanks, guys. Thank you. Thank you very much.